want to invite Gavin Quirk to join me here for a discussion. Hello, Gavin.
Hello.
How's your settling in?
Thanks very much. I'm just trying to defrost.
Just defrost. I'm pretty sure it's as cold as Los Angeles.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Pretty much what happens. So, Gavin, we're quite lucky because as we heard before, Gavin's mom is moving houses, and that's why Gavin is here. And we're so lucky.
Not here.
Not here.
That's why I'm in Glasgow, yeah.
This is where we find out that the next task is to pack.
Exactly.
So that's
yeah.
what we're helping us. But you're here in Glasgow.
Yes.
And it's such a nice coincidence for you to be here and us being able to have this discussion with you in person. So thank you so much for joining us. And, you know, you're born in Glasgow, you're living in Los Angeles for years now.
12 years, yeah.
12 years. And you have an extensive career. So you joined Netflix in 2018,
Yep.
if I'm correct. And before that, you were for 12 years in Disney Studios.
Yes.
So a lot of experience, a lot of things that you can tell us and share with us. As we did before, I'll kick off the conversation with Gavin, but it's about you asking your questions. Anytime you want, put your hand up. I know it's a bit awkward, so I'll keep asking you, do you have any questions, and open the Q&A properly. But it's about you asking what you want to ask. It's quite unique that we have Gavin here, okay? So, I shared a bit about you, but I would love to hear your story from your own mouth. So, do you want to tell us a bit about your background and your story? And what made you go from Glasgow to Los Angeles?
Oh, apart from the obvious, right, okay.
You know, it's the same reason that I came from Greece to Scotland.
Well, yeah, so thank you very much for having me here today, and thank you for all you that reached out on LinkedIn to welcome me, thank you. So, yeah, Gavin Quirk, I'm born in Glasgow, raised in the south side, went to university at Strathclyde. Started my career with Diageo down in London, where I was the brand manager of Caliber, non-alcoholic beer, so we'll chat later. Had 4 years at Diageo, then moved to Disney within London in the studio business in various marketing and sales roles. And that role eventually took me over to LA, where I was leading the international marketing team for a few years. And then as the industry changed, really moving in from movies, DVDs, and into streaming, Netflix became one of my clients, and then Netflix took me over there where I've been for the past 4 years. And yeah, so I've been 12 years in LA, became a US citizen in February last year, so I'm now dual nationality. So yeah, that's my story. And yeah, the reason I went to LA obviously was career-wise and endless sunshine, really.
We're quite jealous, as we're all freezing, which is brilliant, thank you. And obviously, just to say, because obviously you're joining us, kind of like, you know, you have a career in Netflix, but just to be very open, Gavin is joining us here today representing his own views. He's not here representing the company. Yep. You're just telling things from your own perspective, kind of like your own experiences of that. Absolutely. And just want to make sure that that is clear before I drill you down on, you know.
Before I say something, that gets me in trouble, exactly.
You know, trying to protect you. So can you tell us a bit more about the work you're doing in Netflix?
Yeah, so I'm the head of a group called Asset Operations, and what we do is we localize and produce all the creative assets you see on the Netflix product. So Netflix is basically split in two. One half of the business is the content, the movies and TV shows we make or acquire, and the other half is the product, and I'm on the product side. So when you're watching any show or movie and you see the artwork or the trailer, we source that in its original language, whether that's English or something else, and then we translate that into all the different languages for every single Netflix product around the world. So any Netflix consumer watching Netflix is experiencing it in their own language. So for any show, there's probably about 1,500 discrete pieces of artwork or trailer that we change, we resize, so when you watch on your mobile or your web, your TV, it just all works seamlessly, and we give that personalized, localized experience for our members across the world.
Amazing. So Netflix is, kind of like when I think about Netflix, obviously it's kind of like a company that pivoted quite quickly, you know, in a way came to existence and just spread around the world and kind of like changed the industry in a way.
Yeah.
Is that present in kind of like the experience that you have in Netflix? Is like that pivot, and how does that kind of like drills down into your culture?
Yeah, so the Netflix culture is world famous, you know, and when it first was published in Silicon Valley about 20 years ago, it was a game changer. And it's still evolving, it's still we live today. So my experience, there's sort of three main tenets of the Netflix culture. And if you haven't already read it, I would highly recommend No Rules Rules by Reed Hastings, who's our CEO, and Erin Meyer, who wrote The Culture Map, which is another excellent book. And they really go into detail about the Netflix culture and how it works. But for me, the core tenet of our culture is how we give and receive feedback. Feedback is core of what we do, and it's very open. It's up, down, left, right. It's every single day. It's you know, I was kind of nervous coming in thinking I'm going to be standing getting a coffee and someone's going to go, Gavin, you're doing a terrible job. But it's not like that. It's very open, it's very nice. And it's basically so we can all be better. We can be better leaders, we can be better people. In fact, I got feedback last week from a girl on my team, and she said, you know, Gavin, whenever we're on a call and I say something, you know, you always raise your hand and you say what, you know, you agree with what I said and you support and you build on it. And I was thinking, oh, brilliant, this is positive feedback, I'm a great leader. And she says, I want you to stop doing that, because when you do that, it's actually coming across that you're undermining me and you're actually trying to re-explain what I've just said. So we started talking about it, and what we got down to was like she's working on her communication. She feels that she kind of rambles a little bit. And I was subconsciously trying to justify and explain what she was saying. So now we're in a place where I'm helping her with her communication. She's helping me with being a good leader. So that's the kind of feedback we do, and it's all the time and it's constant. So that'd be the first thing. The other part of our culture is something called context, not control. So we don't have a holiday policy at Netflix. We have unlimited holidays. You can go whenever you want, for as long as you want. We don't have an expenses policy either. The only expenses policy we have is act in Netflix's best interest. And what that does is it gives everyone the chance to do what they want. There's no control, there's no micromanagement, and that is in every walk of life at Netflix. And as a leader, you set the context by behaving in that way. So whatever you're doing, you're not controlling people, you're just behaving in that sort of way. So the context, not control, is really important. And then the final part, which is sort of the one that resonates most with people, is what we call freedom and responsibility. Everyone has the freedom, again, to sort of approach their role as they see fit. But they have a responsibility to themselves, the business, and their peers to make sure they're doing the right thing. So when I first joined Netflix, I inherited a team of about 20. And I wanted to get to know them. So I said to my boss, listen, I want to get to know my team. I'm from Scotland. I want to take them for a drink. That's what we do. I said, what can I do? What are the rules? He said, you can do whatever you want. He says you can put $20,000 and hire the Sky Bar on Sunset Boulevard, or you can put $500 behind a bar in Hollywood and take them there. But it's your choice. You have the freedom to do that, but I'll be judging you on what you do and how you approach. And I was like, you don't give a guy from Glasgow a free checkbook to take people out for a drink. So we had a great time at the Sky Bar. It was brilliant. No, but that's it's kind of it's that. So it's just very different to what you'd expect in corporate America. Everyone is treated like an adult. You're expected to do the right thing, and it's liberating, because as a result, that's what people do, and we all act in the interest of Netflix.
Brilliant. Is that the acknowledgement that you don't represent Netflix, so we don't get advantage of the expense policy?
Exactly.
Is that what was happening there?
There's not $20,000 at the Radisson Red, I'll tell you that.
It's like, well, I'm glad we got that out of the way. But it's kind of like, no, seriously, I think the thing you describe in kind of like in culture, I personally love that. I think it's very specific, and it kind of like the examples you give, and especially with feedback. And I think feedback is such an important thing, especially in businesses, because you know, that's the fear of being told that you're not doing a good job, fear of being told that you're not good enough. And people, we all have that feeling inside us that we don't want to be told that, especially if you care about your work and everything. How do you build that culture of openness? So obviously you talked about lead by example, but it's not that easy. And it needs to have foundations for that. So you as a manager, what are you doing to build that culture with your employees?
So something we talk about a lot at Netflix is psychological safety, and we create an environment where everyone's encouraged to give that feedback. So as a leader, I'm always asking my team, how can I be a better leader? And I'm encouraging them to speak to me. And what was mentioned with the sort of nature of 360-degree feedback, you've got to live and breathe the culture. So I make sure my team sees me being very vocal and challenging my boss and my senior leadership. And if I don't agree with a certain path, we do that. But everybody has, and we're very explicit about that, if you've got an idea and you want to run with it, and you get the feedback, and 99% of the people are telling you it's a bad idea, you can still do it. No one's going to stop you doing it. And if you do it and it's a success, fantastic. But if you do it and it fails, what we call, you have to sunshine it. You have to say, I did this, it went wrong, this is what broke, this is what I learned, and you try not to do it again.
No, that's very, very interesting. So the past 2 years have been challenging for everyone in the world for a lot of different reasons. How has it been for Netflix? How has it, even for you, your experience being in part of the company and your team?
Yeah. Well, I suppose from a professional point of view, Netflix was probably one of the few companies and industries that probably did better, and no one takes any pride in that. But everyone was staying at home, everyone was streaming, everybody who maybe hadn't been in Netflix before now was and learning it. So from an industry point of view, I think what the past 2 years did was it accelerated the entertainment industry where it was probably going to get to in 10 years' time. It probably got to in 2. We collapsed what we call the window between a cinema release and an in-home release. That used to be maybe about 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Now it's 0. Like, you release a movie, you can go to the cinema, you can watch it at home. So Netflix, in a way, kind of was at the right place at the right time for what was happening. So from a professional point of view, we didn't have that much of an impact, other than some productions maybe slowing down. From a personal point of view, we all had to adjust. I couldn't come home. I used to come home 5-6 times a year. I couldn't come home for 2 years, which was personally, really difficult for me. And then as a leader, and sort of Matt touched on it earlier on, you have to develop skills that you'd never had before. So I'm having to deal with people in my team who I hadn't met because we'd hired them at the start of the pandemic. I'd never met them face to face, but they were having challenges, adapting to this, and they were, confiding in me about mental health issues, and I had to learn fast, and Netflix were great to support that and help you on. So it affects everyone obviously very different ways. I think hopefully, knock on wood, we're now coming to the end of it. It's changed how we work. I've worked from home for the past 2 years. I'm able to come home for 3 months and still do my job. I work early hours, but I'm on video. So that will all change. I might be able to do my job from here going forward. I know you're probably thinking, why would I move from California to Scotland? But it's still my home. So if I could maybe carry on doing my job, I might be able to. So for all the struggles that all we've had, I feel there's a positivity now that we're maybe coming to the other end and taking those learnings into the next phase.
Definitely. One thing, obviously, I used to come to the US, the West Coast, like Silicon Valley, every year before the world changed. And I think one of the things, kind of like every time talking to people in different positions in Silicon Valley, was that big need to constantly learn and constantly get better. And you touched on that, saying that you had to quickly learn about those skills. And there's this big belief that you always have to be the best at your job. So it doesn't matter who you are, you constantly, because at any point someone can come and take that job. Even if you found a company, the investors can come and say you're not the right person anymore to be doing this. How do you keep up? Where do you go to learn and make sure that you constantly stay at that top level that you want to be?
Yeah, we have a very high-performing culture at Netflix, and we make sort of no apologies about that. We have this term, which is a very American term, but you're told not to be a brilliant jerk, which in Glasgow it's just like, don't be a dick, So just don't, because there's some people who are amazing at what they do, but when they're in that environment, they're not right, they don't fit, and it's like we weed them out quite quickly. So we have that high-performing culture, and that's the expectation of everyone. For me personally, I think, at the start of my career, I think, I'll be honest, when I first moved to Diageo after uni, I think I thought I'd made it. I joined the graduate development scheme and I was down in London. I thought I was gallus, to coin a Glasgow phrase, and I think I probably just took my eye off the ball. I think my ego probably kicked in, and I didn't focus on learning. But I took those learnings, and then when I moved into my new job, I'm always learning. I'm always trying to look at resources. So I just did like a mini MBA over the summer there, and anything that I can kind of learn from, I learn from people. I learn from any resources I can about whatever I can to make me a better leader, a better person in my industry. And that was a harsh lesson I learned at the start of my career.
No, thank you so much. So you mentioned kind of like, what you do at Netflix, which has to do a lot with international, the way I say it, like that, the global aspect of making sure all the movies have that. And obviously, Netflix has quite a globalized existence and culture. How do you ensure that international mindset into the business?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned, 'cause I was thinking about this when I knew the question about international. Like, we don't really talk about international anymore, because international implies US and then everything else is international. So we've kind of broken that language a little bit. So when we release our shows or our movies, we talk about the original language, so the country in which it's produced, and then we localize the different languages. So it's just always thinking about our member at the heart, and the member, what their experience is going to be, and how does that translate literally and figuratively into what they're doing. And so they want to look at Netflix and think, well, this was made for me. They don't think it's a US company. And that's what we've done. We've done that as we've gone into new markets. We have localized UI. We have localized shows. Like 2-3 years ago, I don't know how many of you have seen Squid Game, but you probably wouldn't have seen Squid Game 2 or 3 years ago, because what Netflix is doing is bringing these shows and movies to homes across the world. So we do have a global mindset. We ensure that we're always thinking about that, but we kind of don't really talk about internationalization. It's more about this global framework that we have.
So that's brilliant. Kind of like I thought of a question. Obviously, you worked in Disney as well before. What are the things that you've learned from Disney? And how different was Disney from Netflix,
Oh.
if you can say?
Oh, night and day, night and day. So I worked for Disney in London, and it was a fun place, but an open plan London office. You can imagine what it was like, just like fun. Went to the US, and it was just a different ballgame. You know, the most corporate place I've been, red tape, hierarchy, all of that. But Netflix, it's amazing at Netflix because at Netflix, all information is open. You know, every memo, every strategy doc, from the newest member to the CEO can access it. And the minute you make information accessible to all, you break down the barriers. So when I was at Disney, it was always like, well, you know, you're not at the right level to see this. Only VPs can see this, or this has to be approved by 5 VPs. At Netflix, it's not like that. You have the access to all information, and that breakdown, or the breakdown of the barriers, the access to all of that, is entirely liberating. So that's, I think, the main difference. You know, the culture of that togetherness and lack of hierarchy.
No, that's brilliant. I think it's fascinating. How can you do that for so many people? I think that's kind of like find difficult. You know, I always think they're just nodding. But I think that for me is that, you know, having smaller teams and find it very difficult to kind of like create that culture that everyone in a way agrees with and follows.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing to think that can happen with thousands of people.
Well, so I can't remember who wrote this, but they said like once you go past 10,000 people, it's very difficult to maintain that culture. And Netflix is around about that now globally, but 10,000. So the challenge to maintain the culture is hard, and you know, Reed Hastings has said that the culture has to evolve as you go through. But I think the way we preserve it is through our hiring. You know, we have a very intense hiring process. I went through it, but they're always asking about the culture. Do you understand it? Have you read the memo? What does this mean to you? What does freedom and responsibility mean? So we do it at the recruitment phase, and once people are in, if they don't live up to the culture, you know, they don't last.
So that's your main recruitment and retaining.
Yeah. It's so important. It's the backbone of why Netflix has been so successful, and it's something that we pride ourselves on, and it's something that we make sure we're living and breathing every day.
Brilliant. I would love to hear your questions. Steve.
Gavin, could I give you some feedback?
Please do. Just don't ask for free Netflix.
I suppose the main question I've got is the lessons you're learning from the culture in Netflix. I'm reading Reed's book now, and a lot of it kind of flies in the face of convention in terms of the way that you run things. And it's obviously been super successful for Netflix. Can you see any way that you could maybe transplant the Netflix culture into a startup? And can it work? What would be the downfalls, the pitfalls? If you was running a startup and you wanted to implant that secret sauce into a startup, how would you do it, and what would you focus on?
Yeah, well, I think, as I say, you know, the core tenets are actually universal. You know, the core tenet of feedback, that can be done anywhere at any time. You know, that notion I was talking about, freedom and responsibility, I can understand, you know, startup might be a bit more difficult. You know, if things are tight, you can't just have a no vacation policy or a no expenses policy. I understand that. But I think that what I always come back to is the people that you have around you and the attitude. That's what it comes down to. So I think anything can be, you know, planted in with that. You know, Reed disrupted this industry, and he disrupted it from an idea, but from the culture. And he insists that we always live and breathe that. So I can't think of any part of Netflix's culture in terms of how we interact with one another that couldn't be picked up and transplanted elsewhere. I think it comes down to people, it comes down to attitude. I think it comes down to making tough decisions if it's not working, and just staying true to the culture. The minute you kind of sort of make, like you divert off it and you say, you know, we're not going to do that anymore, then you're broken. That's what Netflix has been so successful over the past 20 odd years. They've rigidly stuck that this is the culture and we expect all of you to live and breathe it. And people know that coming in. And it can be a hard culture for some, you know, it can be an adjustment. Moving from Disney, one of the most corporate companies in the world, and in America, to Netflix was a massive shift for me. And it took time to adjust, but you just have to have that mindset. So I would say focus on the people, focus on maybe the elements that you think you could implement in your business, and then just stay true to the path.
So Gavin, Zoe told our cohort yesterday that we needed to figure out how to Americanize ourselves. So my question to you is, have you been Americanized? What have been the good and bad aspects of that? And the flip side, I guess, how have your team in the US kind of reacted to your Scottishness? Has anything been lost in translation?
Oh yeah, well, I hope, and you'll have to tell me if I've got one of those horrible transatlantic accents, because My pals back here tell me all the time. In fact, they told me Saturday night I've got this weird thing I go up at the end of sentences. So I hope I don't have that. I think my Americanisms from a cultural point of view, I think there was an adjustment to sort of how you deal with yourself in meetings. I think the UK culture is very different. You know, I just think back at times at Disney, we would openly be swearing at each other and arguing and that kind of stuff. It was just very colloquial, very easy. But, you know, when I went to Disney, it was more of a formal environment. So I think that was one of those things. I think the politics in America, not the politics, but the office politics are slightly different. I think you had to kind of navigate that a little bit. I think my Scottishness has opened a lot of doors. You know, it's a miracle, you know, what you can get away with when you have an accent like mine. I mean, I think what somebody actually told me once, they said, you know, when you have an accent, we think you're really intelligent. So hang on, you're implying I'm not really intelligent, but I didn't quite know how to take that. But it does open the doors. I think the self-deprecating nature of Scots in general has been really helpful as well. I tend to put people at ease in that environment. I think I've been given that feedback before as well, that I can instantly put people at ease when we have that conversation, and I always try to get to know people as well, which sometimes in corporate America they don't. So I don't know if it's a Scottish thing, but it's just that human touch of actually wanting to know people and genuinely be interested in what they're doing. So as I say, I'm now officially, you know, British and American. I've got 2 passports, so I do straddle both, but I'll always be Scottish.
So you mentioned that it's really high performance kind of culture, and you've got the no holiday or like as much holiday as you want. How does that affect in terms of like new employees and burnout, in terms of they just don't take holidays, and because it's so high performing, how do you stop it being really high pressure as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think that comes back to the context, not control. So as a leader, you have to lead by example. So when I took over my team, I got a new team in the summer there, and I met with them all and I said, look, I'm going to be quite clear to you. My priorities are family, friends, this job, and closely after that, Rangers, but I didn't tell them that. But I was quite explicit to them. I said, and that's the order I expect you to approach this as well. So I tell them to take holidays. And the other day, one of the guys in my team, he took a holiday, and it was over Thanksgiving, and he was emailing me because he knew I wasn't taking the holiday because I was here. And I said, I don't want to hear from you. Like, this world will keep on turning, Netflix will keep on functioning. And I always remind them as well, we're making films and TV, like, we're not doctors, we're not surgeons, we're not saving lives. Like, in the grand scheme of things, this is not important what we're doing. And if it ever becomes not fun and not enjoyable, there's something wrong. So it's leading by example, but it's also having that very open conversation that if they do feel safe psychologically to come to me and say, look, I'm burned out, I want to take a break, I want to take 3 months off, and we talk through it and we get there. So yes, it's high performing. Yes, we expect the best of people. Yes, it can be stressful, but it's only as stressful as you allow it to be. So as long as we're having those conversations and I'm leading from the front as an example, then we tend to get through it.
Just a weird question. Do you watch Netflix or yourself?
All day, every day. but we don't get it for free, believe it or not.
Ooh.
Yeah, so we all pay for it.
No, I mean, the question is around the SaaS model. Basically, like Netflix is a great example, based on memberships, subscriptions, etc. What's your suggestion for a startup company to put a price tag on a SaaS model? Because obviously, like, in Netflix, when you produce a TV series or something, one of them may cost, much cheaper, another one going to be more expensive. How do you put the price tag on a, subscription fee?
Yep.
Because this is one of my challenges in my business.
I mean, so we're entering into dangerous territory of what I can and can't really discuss, but I think at a sort of macro level, we obviously, we have tiers in Netflix in terms of sort of the type of product you want. So, I mean, it's going to be a horrible answer, but I think, the research we've done is what consumers are willing to pay and how they value the product that we offer. So whether they want HD, whether they want multiple screens or not, and, we do that and we try to have a consistent price across the markets, as best we can, because obviously the powers that be in Netflix, not my decision, but another team have decided they put a price on what the value is, and so far that's what consumers are willing to pay. So if I look at my previous world and look at Disney Plus, for example, I can talk about that because they're not employed by them. They picked a price point to come in and it was very, very low, and they built a lot of member base, but they gave certain deals which was like a year at this price. Now that price is probably going to go up, but they've now got critical mass. They've got over 100 million subscribers globally. So their entry price point might not be their price point going forward. So it's really about the strategy. If your strategy is to get a huge member base up front, price it low and get them in, or if you want to set a high value proposition early on and maintain that and maybe get a slower growth curve, do that. But it would all depend on the product offering and what your consumers are kind of willing to spend. I know it probably doesn't help with the answer, but that's just my perspective on what I've seen in the industry.
If you had a price in mind, it would have been very strange.
Well, exactly.
That.
Yeah, it should have been that one.
Diane?
Thanks very much. That was really inspirational. And do you need a PA? That's the only thing I want. Really good at organising. So that really gives a shout.
Sold.
What I want to ask was, I can actually see that business able to organise or try to implement some of this stuff that you're talking about culturally. We just said to everybody, there's no cap and holidays. We just wouldn't have a business to run.
Exactly, yeah.
Do you think it's a cultural something that's implemented in the US that's accepted, or you need to set yourself apart? Because I just think some of this stuff is amazing. I don't know how it would work in the west of Scotland or in Glasgow companies. Do you think it's just something that's over there and it's accepted?
Well, it doesn't work everywhere in America. I think it's probably started in Silicon Valley, this kind of sort of notion of the lack of holidays, the pool table in the office. It kind of started there, and because Netflix obviously started there, we brought it down to Hollywood. But like Disney don't do that, for example. But I think what's happening now is a lot of these benefits people are beginning to expect, particularly in that industry. So now more companies are sort of dabbling in it. So it's a combination of things, because it might not work for every company in every location. People may abuse it. Netflix has a massive infrastructure that when they can recruit, they spend a lot of time. So we assume people don't. People work in Netflix's best interest, and largely they do. But it can't necessarily translate. I think it all comes down to, I'd say, the people. But I'd say it's not an American thing. It's very much a tech thing and a Netflix thing, because not every company does it.
Amazing. We don't have more time for questions, but a big round of applause for Gavin. That was brilliant.